Hello everybody, it's AJ back again with the Mighty Glue Stick, and today I'm going to be bringing you another monsterology video where I talk about a specific environment and the creatures that live within it. And this is inspired by a request from somebody to ask about sewer monsters. And I realised that I hadn't really covered sewers, which are very important for Dungeons and Dragons games, which quite often start off in sewers, or at least, underneath a city somewhere. So what is a sewer exactly? It's a drainage system to take away waste from a city. That's the general gist of a sewer at its most basic level. And in many cases, with particularly ancient cities, it can be broken down, or it can be quite robust sort of mason work and old school engineering. It can support the buildings up above. It can consist of the lower parts of buildings, which are actually purpose-built with a sewer in the bottom section there that connects up in a sort of modular way. It can have a central canal and walkways, or it can have a sloping sort of bank on the side, so that the entire thing is basically just a tunnel, which is much more efficient when you think about it. And it's designed to be flooded by rainwater and things like that to wash it out, and only be sort of serviced by people when they go down there and detect a problem of some kind. They also have copious amounts of vent holes and things like that to take care of gases and if it does overflow and flood. Yeah, so in the instance of like a sewer in a Dungeons and Dragons world, there's a high likelihood that it connects up with ancient stuff which was built by other people. So a city may be built upon the ruins of a former city. So you may encounter elven or dwarven architecture underneath a human city, or entire submerged buildings, or connecting up with cave networks and things like that. So the environment can be quite interesting and varied, and it can be fantastical. They can be gigantic sewers built by literally giants. And they can have all sorts of activity going on down there. So just from an intelligent civilization point of view, you can have cults and murderers and psychopaths, lunatics, prisoners stored down there, suspended from cages and noxious gases. It can be a maze that people are thrown into, and if they make their way out of there alive, they may have served their penance. All sorts of things, really. And of course, it's an ideal place to get rid of bodies. So there may be floating corpses, and so the sewers may be the haunt of the city watch, who go down there to walk around and look for bodies and catch pockets and things where they know that the rains are going to wash up remains. Now, of course, a sewer, from the interesting point of view of monsters, is a closed environment. So if you have something like a sewer alligator down there, or piranhas, or giant leeches, or remores, or troglodytes, yaunties, horgan trolls, grimlocks, eticaps, giant spiders, scorpions, fungus creatures, octopi, sharks, even crabs, mimics, giant insects of other kinds like giant cockroaches, or sand fleas, or that sort of thing. You can have gricks and growls and otyugs and sturges, giant bats, regular bats, diseased bats, snakes of all kinds, particularly constrictors, feral animals, all sorts of things like feral cats or dogs, or things that have adapted to live in the sewer. You can have mad people wandering around who have mutated. You can have mutant creatures of all kinds down there, things that sort of defy the rational explanation. Oozes, all sorts of diseases, parasites, that sort of thing. Giant rats, of course, being the mainstay, and creatures which live mainly on the surface, but also exist down in the sewers at night time, and generally come up into the city proper only at night. So nocturnal creatures that find their home in the sewer. So you can have multiple levels of creatures that live in the sewers. You can have things which just sort of hang out there and don't really delve very deep into the sewers, and then you can have lots of awful things which collect in the lost and forgotten bits of the sewers that the City Watch never visits. This is where you find undead, demons and things hiding out there, elemental creatures that have adapted to that environment, and fungus. Fungus likes to be undisturbed and not exposed to sunlight, and it feeds on rot and detritus. How I mentioned octopus, there's no reason why you have to conform to our earthly requirements for an octopus to be a sea creature. You could quite easily have a freshwater octopus that lives in city sewers, such as the creature from Star Wars, which existed inside a trash compactor. And same thing with giant insects and things. You can have all sorts of combinations. For instance, the giant bugs that you find in D&D, namely fire beetles and bombardier beetles and giant spiders, ettercaps, that sort of thing. Oh, and also, of course, the big creatures that you find out in the fields and stuff. No, what are they called? I was just using one the other day. Dungeon Master Johnny did a thing on them the other day. Ant eggs. How could I forget ant eggs? So ant eggs could most certainly hang out in a sewer. I'd imagine they'd be quite disruptive though, and all sorts of creatures would burrow and worm their way through the earth anyway, such as juvenile purple worms, even large purple worms, worms, giant serpents of some kind. That sort of thing, like basilisks and all sorts of creatures that you might find in caves outside of a city would find their home or sneak into the city through the sewer network. They would find their way in there. Goblinoids, of course, could easily work their way into a human city through building outposts in the sewers. It's not exactly an ideal environment for them either. They're just as subjected to disease and rot and a need for sunlight as surface creatures, for the most part. But things like grimlocks and other troglodytes, trolls and things, they can exist in a subterranean environment indefinitely. And you would only really encounter them when you go down into the sewers and you're impinging on their territory. So they don't come up into the surface world, and they would only really bother you if you went down into their environment. Of course, they could make raids on the surface, just like drow, come up out of the sewers in order to raid food stores and things like that if times are particularly harsh. And of course, they could come flooding out of the sewers if there is a flood. If there's heavy rainfall, you could have an increased instance of creatures coming out of the sewers to attack people on the surface. Oozes, diseases, parasites, those sort of waterborne creatures like the freshwater octopus and lamprey and piranhas and leeches and that sort of thing. You could have sturges, which just sort of find their way out of the sewers accidentally, and you have an increased, just random attacks from things like that, which would spark people to go down into the sewers and purge any sort of parasites and unwanted creatures that are found down there. Otyughs, of course, are actually slightly handy because they get rid of waste. They're quite happy slopping around and eating wastes, and so it's a natural environment for them. And they would actually clean up the sewers quite a bit, as would the oozes. Oozes, of course, have a quite a utilitarian use in sewer situations where they just move along and dissolve organic waste, leaving behind metal deposits, swords, gems, stones, daggers, knives, that sort of thing. And of course, fungus get rid of most organic stuff as well, but they're pretty good at staying in their own sort of environment, and fungus don't really bother anybody if you don't go down and bother them. Ettercaps and giant spiders, on the other hand, do predate upon others, and yeah, there's all sorts of possibilities with that. And mimics, of course. Mimics would have a natural home down there, and they could easily go up, imitate some sort of vine or something that you would find on the side of the road and right next to a sewer grate. The majority of the body of the mimic would be underneath the sewer grate, and as soon as you touch it, you adhere to it, and it sucks you down into oblivion. So quite possible there. And of course, sewer sharks. Why not? So there you go. I hope that gives you some inspiration for what sort of creatures you might find down there in the sewers. And yeah, I do recommend a product by Heroic Maps, which is their sewer map tiles. They really do a good maze-like sewer system. They have modular sewer tile sets as well. You only need to buy it once. You can print it out as many times as you want, and it can make very complicated maze-like sewers, or even quite straightforward ones. And they're certainly a welcome addition to any game where you need to have players that are doing things in combat in a confined space. It's usually pretty good to have some sort of visual representation there to know where you're standing and where you've got cover and who you're standing behind and that sort of thing. So yeah, enjoy. Have fun down in the murky depths of the sewers. Oh yeah, don't forget to Quite often the sewer gases are explosive, so if you're going down there with an open flame, make some sort of little random roll table, and let the players know that the air is starting to smell real bad, and this flame starts to turn strange colours. Maybe a forewarning that they need to turn their lights out.